mainstream media still say, when you say, see the Great Reset, exactly what's been planned all along, they say still that that's a conspiracy theory. Why? Because they are owned by those that own the World Economic Forum. So here's Klaus Schwab this week talking about the Great Reset leading to a fusion of our physical, digital, and biological identity, which is, as I've been saying in the books all the years, humanity being fused with AI, and AI will then become the human mind. They're telling us. The story here, globalist, psychopathic, pure, undiluted, evil globalist, Klaus Schwab, made it clear that transhumanism is an integral part of the Great Reset when he said that the Fourth Industrial Revolution, which is code for the transformation of human society, would lead to a fusion of our physical, digital, and biological identity, which in his book he clarifies is implantable microchips that can read your thoughts. Actually, it's far, far deeper even than that. I've got his book here, which unfortunately I've read, called COVID-19, The Great Reset. He's a co-author, Klaus Schwab. And it's making the case for using the, quote, COVID-19 crisis to transform human society, which of course is exactly why they've manufactured the crisis. And the story goes on, the agenda is primarily based around dismantling the current capitalist system in favor of greater centralized technocrat rule, which will lead to lower living standards, less fuel consumption, fewer civil liberties, no civil liberties, and the accelerated automation of jobs. However, other key aspects to the Great Reset, or the Fourth Industrial Revolution, as Schwab calls it, well, he calls it that because, that's been in my books since way back. This whole, if you read my latest book, The Answer, I go into this background. Where did the Green Movement come from? Well, it came out of these multi-billionaires and in those days, multi-millionaires who, through the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers, actually created what we know today as the Green Movement. And they were talking, even then, we're talking in the 1990s, about the Fourth Industrial Revolution. There was an insider who wasn't part of that, but he was an insider in the early days of the creation of green, who actually went public, and even back in the 1990s, 1992, was revealing all this and saying, hey, this is what's planned, and exactly that has happened. So what he's talking about, therefore, is the transformation of the human form into a synthetic cyber entity. And I talk about this with Celeste Solum in some detail in that video I just mentioned. So Schwab explains with excitement, of course he does, because it's what they've planned all along is now emerging. Explains with excitement how upcoming technology will allow authorities to intrude into the hitherto private space of our minds, reading our thoughts and influencing our behavior. He goes on to predict that this will provide an incentive for law enforcement to implement Minority Report style pre-crime programs. Quote, as capabilities in this area improve, the temptation for law enforcement agencies and courts to use techniques to determine the likelihood of criminal activity, assess guilt, or even possibly retrieve memories directly from people's brains will increase, writes Schwab. Even crossing a national border might one day involve a detailed brain scan to access an individual's security risk. Anyone getting it yet? Schwab waxes lyrical about the transhumanist utopian dream shared by all elitists, which will ultimately lead to the creation of human cyborgs. Quote, fourth industrial revolution technologies will not stop at becoming part of the physical world around us. They will become part of us. Indeed, some of us already feel that our smartphones have become an extension of ourselves. Today, well, that's why they were introduced, of course. Today's external devices, from wearable computers to virtual reality headsets, will almost certainly become implantable in our bodies and brains. Schwab also openly endorses something the media still claims is solely a domain of discussion for conspiracy theorists, namely active implantable microchips that break the skin barrier of our bodies. The fusion of our physical, digital, and biological identity relates to the transhumanist singularity and a future where people have their every movement tracked and every thought read by an implantable microchip. Well, but there's another level to this. It's not just that every movement is tracked and every thought is read, it's that the thoughts themselves come from AI via this connection. So it's not just the COVID-19 scam that we're dealing with here. That is an excuse to advance a much, much bigger agenda for total human control. And like I say, they tell us what's going to happen, and they do it so often in the form of predictions. So here's the psychopath, another one, Bill Gates, saying more than 50% of business travel will disappear in the post-coronavirus world. And he's saying that because he knows that's the plan. The coronavirus will fundamentally alter the way that people travel for and conduct business. Even after the pandemic is over, Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates said, my prediction, see, this is how they do it, my prediction would be that over 50% of business travel and over 30% of days in the office will go away, Gates said. Moving forward, Gates predicted that there will be a very high threshold for conducting business trips now that working from home is more feasible. However, some companies may be more extreme with their efforts to reduce in-person meetings than others, he said. Gates, whose foundation has been working to deliver a coronavirus vaccine to people most in need, you see the way these mainstream articles are written. That psychopath Bill Gates, he's such a nice man. He's saying here that his foundation has been working to deliver coronavirus vaccine for people most in need. Said during a new podcast, Bill and Rashida Jones ask big questions, is the name of the podcast apparently. Bill and Melinda Gates, it kind of rolls off, doesn't it, with that foundation of theirs that is funding everything that's bad for humanity. He said that a simpler schedule due to the pandemic, now that he doesn't travel for business. Well, he doesn't need to, does he? Because the network is operating from wherever he is. And even then, Bill Gates, psychopathic, pure evil that he is, he's still a gopher within this network. Something else this week where they're telling you, see, the more control they get, the more they'll tell you because they think they're untouchable now, whether you know or not. And this is Mark Zuckerberg, who was being questioned in hearings on Capitol Hill, from afar, of course. And he admitted in this to and fro that Facebook spies on its users, even when they're not on Facebook, and that Facebook coordinates its censorship with Google and Twitter, which is just admitting what I've been saying all along, which is that Twitter, Google, YouTube, Facebook, they're all the same company, ultimately, controlled by the same force. So, of course, they're going to work in unison. And the scale of censorship now is going into it's almost laughable if it wasn't so tragic. And as I've been pointing out about Joe Biden, if he does, it seems likely at the moment, but we'll see. If he does win the presidency, then all these wokers with their mentality molded by the 1% through the ludicrously named education system, all these wokers, they actually believe that by removing Trump, they've rid America of fascism. They actually say that. When actually what they've done, if Biden gets the presidency, is they've installed fascism. We're going to see scales of censorship and fascistic imposition in the Biden presidency. Well, it won't be the Biden presidency. Of course, he's just an empty shell, but officially. We're going to see levels of fascism that have never been seen in America.